Hello, and welcome to the final candid conversation with the inaugural Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, or the MICRC. I'm Tom Ivacco, former executive director of the University of Michigan's Center for Local, State, and Urban Policy, and I'll be moderating this panel discussion that we're calling Almost the Last Word. We say almost because there may be a rebuttal by others once this panel discussion is complete, and we'll just have to wait and see about that. Recently, one of the former chairs of the commission made public recommendations against having citizen redistricting commissions like the MICRC with randomly chosen citizen commissioners, and recommending instead, as I understand it, that redistricting should be done only by experts, or at least by people with relevant redistricting experience and skills. Now, as the inaugural MICRC enters dormancy after completing its work, it's important for the public to consider all of the voices of the former chairs of the commission, in addition to the one dissenting voice. And so Almost the Last Word provides an opportunity to hear from the other chairs, even though they know they may not actually have the last word when all is said and done. Knowing that the commission speaks with one voice with respect to dissenting views, these other commission chairs will share their perspectives regarding their experiences and lessons learned in facilitating the commission. So tonight, we'll be joined by the other former chairs of the commission, including Stephen T. Lett, semi-retired attorney, Brittany Kellum, entrepreneur and trauma practitioner, MC Rothhorn, compost engineer and beekeeper, Dustin Witches, railroad conductor, Cynthia Orton, administrative assistant, and Anthony Eade, a policy advocate and coordinator. That's a fascinating range of experiences and backgrounds that these individuals brought to the commission, and it'll be interesting to hear about their lessons having served as chairs of this first MICRC. I'm going to ask a few questions of each of these commissioners one at a time, taking about 5 minutes each. And then at the end, we'll have an open conversation amongst all of the former chairs to discuss their lessons learned having served on the commission in these leadership roles. Altogether, the panel will last about an hour or so. So with that background, we'll get started with the current MICRC chair, Commissioner Stephen T. Lett. Commissioner Lett, can you please identify the period of the MICRC's work when you served as chair, and then describe a bit about your leadership philosophy and approach as chair of the commission?
Well, I was the inaugural chair, so I was the first chair, and we began as soon as the election took place. That was one of the first things that we did as a group, was to have an election of a chairperson and vice chair. And I stayed in that position for the first 6 months, and then the vice chair, Brittany Kellum, took over. So the issues that I dealt with the commission were obviously formation of the commission and how it was going to work, what we needed to do, who we needed to onboard in order to make things run semi-smoothly. So that was the get-go of it. And of course, this is in COVID, and we're doing Zoom meetings, which are not necessarily favorable to building really good relationships within the group. The relationship building that became better came on later when we started meeting in person. So the first things that we dealt with, and I dealt with as the chair, was to find a executive director to handle the day-to-day operations, and someone to lead us in that direction. So there were discussions on who are we looking for, what are we looking for, what are their job titles going to be. And we had a number of people on the commission who had experience in, I'll say, other board activities. Doug Clark comes to mind. He had been in corporate settings and was very up to date on what needed to be done. So we decided, okay, how are we going to do this? So we're going to do it with subcommittees, ad hoc committees. We would have typically, not always, but typically 3 members, a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent, would form the committee. They would send out requests for people to make an application, and then we would review. And we did that same process for the executive director, the legal advisor, the PR, public relations person, and really all of our experts and attorneys. We did that same process with. Same thing for the people that prepared videos, anything along those lines. We did that same process with. Then I think we had some kind of standing committees that we felt would be appropriate, and we would vote on those, and those would be majority vote. I can't tell you off the top of my head right now what the ones that were there. I can say right out of the gate, we lost 2 members. I never heard exactly why they didn't want to proceed, but I'm sure it was probably they thought the time that was going to be needed to devote to this process was more than they either were willing to give or had the time to give. And so those were replaced, and eventually the dissenting chairperson came on board.
Yeah.
I think the other things that we did is we got in people from Arizona and California, and people like yourself and Matt from MSU, who did a really good job. Matt did a really good job.
Yeah.
You were okay.
I'll take it.
But it was interesting to listen to what California and Arizona had gone through. And one thing always stuck with me, they both of them said, you're going to get sued. So, do the best job you can. And at the end, whatever product you put out, somebody's not going to like it and they're going to sue you. And of course, that happened. And I think the thing that I found most relevant in that scenario of getting sued, or the prospect of it, is nobody really took exception to that. Everybody said, "Hey, we're going to give it our best shot. If the courts don't like it, they can tell us that, and we'll go back and we'll redo it," which is exactly what we did. So from that point, I think if I'm to give an opinion on how did the process work, I think the process worked really well. And I think that's been supported by people like the Princeton Review, and we really did have Matt come in and talk to us. And we asked him straight out, how did we do? He says, basically, it looks like you guys did pretty well. And we asked him if we had, if he had looked at the individual outcomes, and he said, I did, and there wasn't a lot of change. And by that I mean of the districts, we had to go back and change and make those changes too. So once we got that under our belt and got going, we had to pick a map drawer firm, and we picked EDS. And then we really figured out that we absolutely knew nothing about redistricting. Maybe some other people think differently than me, but if you would have asked me what is redistricting, I would have said redistricting is what politicians do to gerrymander their members into safe seats. We were accused of gerrymandering. I don't think that we did. We did what we thought was appropriate, and when we were told it wasn't, we changed it.
Looking back, as you've described, at the launch of the commission in September of 2020, I think it was, there was just an enormous amount of work to do. It was a blank slate. You all had to kind of pick yourselves up by the bootstrap and create a commission and create all the structure and processes and so on. Huge undertaking for anybody. For a committee of 13 strangers to do is a pretty big lift. We're going to move on in just a moment here to the next commissioner. But if you could just tell me quickly, what was your philosophy about leading the commission as chair that first time out? What were your goals as the chair itself?
Well, my goal was pretty simple, is just to keep the thing moving along. Mm-hmm. If we got bogged down, my major philosophy, and people have heard me say this, is once I've heard the same point 3 times, we can move on. And that comes from my background, as I'm a mediator. I've mediated all kinds of cases for years, and I've chaired other boards for a long time. So my philosophy was just to corral the cats, get them all moving in the same direction, and not let things get totally out of hand.
Great. Thank you very much. Valuable perspective. Next up, we will turn to Commissioner Brittany Kellum, who served, I believe, as the second chair of the commission. And so, Commissioner Kellum, great to see you as well.
Nice to see you.
I'm going to ask the same questions. Can you tell us a little bit about the period of time that you served as chair of the commission? And tell us first a little bit about your leadership philosophy and approach as chair of the commission itself.
Tom, you want me to dig so far back into my brain? That's so fine, though. This is fun. So when I was a chair, and I have never been a person to care about titles, so I think that piece about me goes to speak to how I conducted myself as a chair of the MICRC at the time, which was during the hearings, right? This is the first time that you've had this group kind of on the road together, trying to navigate space, trying to figure out what we're doing, what it even means to redistricting, what does it mean to interact with the public, because some of us might not have, we have all different personalities, right? So some of us might not want to be forward facing and shake hands. It's not that we think that people have cooties, but it takes a lot to meet people for the first time and then also try to describe this new initiative, this new thing that you're a part of. So my experience and my personal philosophy is one and the same, and is that I tried to build community. When folks were coming up during the hearings and introducing themselves, I made sure to remember their names. I made sure to go out into the audience and mingle and answer questions. And I led with my personality. I led with the fact that I'm also a citizen and having to navigate space. I made sure that if there were folks of color, if there were other Black people that were hesitant or, had extra questions, that they felt not just roped in because this is something that we're doing and folks should participate, but that it truly started to feel important, and that they tried to understand, or they began to understand, that their voice mattered. And this was, in fact, something that folks could be a part of. So it was a lot of listening. And I enjoy that because I enjoy people's stories. I enjoy authenticity. So I felt like when people were coming up, they weren't just talking about themselves or introducing themselves, but they were talking about their communities. And so the way that I treated the public during my tenure as a chair was also how I attempted to treat my peers. I wanted to know about their lives. I wanted to know about what they did before they were a commissioner, what what they were still doing. I at the time, and I could be wrong, so someone can correct me if they come after me, but I think I at the time was like one of two commissioners that were still working a full-time job because we were allowed to do that. And I got railroaded, steamrolled. And I don't really care about that because I think that's a part of it, that we were to bring our true selves. And I believe that during that time, my grandmother was ill. And during the time that I was a commissioner, she actually passed away. And I was working full time. So I was doing my job. I was hitting the road, sometimes driving, not even with my fellow commissioners, but driving my own car to make sure that I was there. So I think that's the piece that maybe people didn't understand about me. And we were also working out kinks, right? Like by the time all of this was done, you could attend a meeting, be off camera, you would still see your name. No one cared about that. But at the time that the commission was just starting, people didn't understand the rules. So sometimes I was told that I couldn't attend if I was going to be off camera. So that looked bad. And I think the curious thing is the work that I do as a trauma specialist and also as a survivor of childhood trauma allowed me to not hold on to that, but reimagine and recreate my story every time. I just kept showing up the same. I kept being kind. I kept being an advocate for fellow commissioners. I kept using my own voice, even if it was determined to be a little problematic, which, that's up for opinion. But I kept doing what I knew to do, which is to hold the work sacred, which was to listen to communities of interest, even as we began to really imagine what that term even meant. So yeah, my time as chair of the commission was during, maybe for some, like the scariest part. This is the first time that the public is seeing us not in a laptop form, not virtually, but they could see what we really look like, what we were wearing that day, if we really, were believing what folks were saying and listening. And then it bled into the business when we actually started to map and to really figure out what that process was going to be. So I would encapsulate my time as a chair as listening and building community for sure. And my personal philosophy was for us to have some fun and to be able to take some risk, really be comfortable with not rushing, not always getting it right, because I have faith that if we got along, if there was rapport within us, then when we had to say hard things to one another, those could be said, but also there would be a place to put that and there would be less offense. Now we know things turned out differently, but I do think that I did a fantastic job doing that and I represented Detroit well.
Great. I recall hearing early on Commissioner Lett mentioned in the first couple of months of the commission's work, hearing from the California Commission and the Arizona Commission. And I recall that you all heard from them the importance of building camaraderie among the commissioners, building relationships among the commissioners. And it sounds like that was part of your approach in the listening and making sure people have their chance to be heard and tell their stories and so on. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's totally accurate. Just because that's my personality. I love building community. I have a job, and not just a job, but a passion where I am teaching others how to hold space. And so this wasn't, a traditional work environment for me where, it doesn't matter if someone likes you. No, it doesn't matter if we're friends. It kind of does matter. Because we're spending long hours with one another. And though it's not important to always agree. It's important to have a standard of respect. It's important to know the person that you're working alongside with, especially as it pertains to when we had to make final decisions about the map. But even to draw takes trust. Even to have the conversations we were having about communities of interest, there were only two commissioners. Well, Commissioner Ede is also from the Metro Detroit and Detroit area, but there were only two Black women natives from Detroit. And if we're drawing Detroit, especially if we had to redraw Detroit, that's when it matters if there's community. That's where it matters if you're able to listen. And especially since we were tasked with interacting with members of the public, and we didn't always know their background or who they were or why they were there. So it pays to have a rapport with a group, so that even when you're tired and fatigued, you know that you've been rubbing elbows and, eating snacks and starving together. And so you can trust the person that's alongside of you because they also are members of the community. So I was actually disheartened and disappointed when there were times where we were treating each other like disgruntled coworkers instead of fellow citizens.
Great. I don't want to editorialize too much here in the beginning of this panel discussion, but I just want to note that I'm already hearing skills and qualifications for citizen commissioners that are, maybe a little bit outside the bounds of what people think about when it comes to redistricting. There are hard skills required in redistricting, knowing how to draw maps, knowing how to understand various kinds of data, and so on. But there are a lot of soft skills as well that can go a long way. And I'm already hearing kind of examples of some of those things. So thank you for sharing your perspective. Next, we will hear from former Commissioner MC Rothhorn. Commissioner Rothhorn, thank you as well for being here. And I'm going to put the same questions to you. Can you please tell us a little bit about the period of the commission's work when you served as chair, and what approach you brought to that role? What's your leadership philosophy in that setting?
Yes, thanks, Tom. I think we started September 20th, and I think that's when Commissioner Lett began, and then Commissioner Kellum began in March 21. I started in March 22. And I think, so in March 22, and I served for 6 months until September, my philosophy was, it was a lot of what Commissioner Kellum was just describing, like trying to maintain trust, trying to listen. We as commissioners were citizens, and my own background is, so I live in an intentional community, meaning I don't accidentally like my neighbors. I intentionally like my neighbors. I intended to live this way. And I found also cooperative businesses, which are built on, I'll say, more democracy and decision-making, which also means meetings, right? And those skill sets, like you wisely said, like there's a soft skill set that is a hard skill set when you're trying to facilitate people. Right, facilitation styles and what it means to listen. There's ways to demonstrate that you're listening. Those are hard. I'll just say hard skills. And sometimes, right, to be as clear as possible. Maybe we'll just keep them as soft skills. But boy, it is hard when you don't have them in a meeting. And so I come from that business background and a living background where there's a lot of meetings where I know that the way that I show up in a meeting, I don't have to be the chair to be a good group member, right? Or to be someone who can contribute to, let's say, finding consensus or building consensus or reframing, finding language, or even just, I suppose, not speaking, right? Trying to step back and make space. And I think those have been addressed by Commissioner Lett and Commissioner Kellum pretty well. So my style, I suppose, comes out of that cooperative, I'll say, business spirit, which is which is designed to also, like, I'll say, educate. Right. One of the things that I really believe that we as chairs, we had the benefit, so to speak, of stepping into a role which was hard. But that courage to lead, gosh, I mean, John F. Kennedy, right? Every great leader, I suppose, has talked about like stepping into the arena, right? And sort of like doing battle in some ways with your own demons, and sometimes with the people who call you, an ally or a friend, right? And sometimes without those people. So I guess what I mean is like that arena is important, right? And it is challenging, and I appreciate the people who do it. And I guess I just, yeah, I felt like I'm going to try, so as a chair, like that was my, I'll suppose my philosophy was to do, to do my best and to recognize that, right, the opinions of the people who were, let's say, criticizing, often had not been in the arena already, or didn't, they didn't hurt as much. I'll just be clear, it hurt. There were lots of hurts, but my philosophy was to sort of like self-soothe and try to just, and frankly, like the trust that we did build, right? There were really good times. And when we were in person, I really felt it. Like I bonded with, my fellow commissioners in person. It was really important.
Well,
go ahead.
What do you think were some of the major accomplishments in this time frame?
So what happened in the beginning of my term in March, we had our general counsel had just resigned in January of 22, and our executive director resigned on the same day that I was appointed or elected as chair. So there was this, we had finished the mapping phase. We had finalized our maps, and we were sort of winding down. And as has been said, we were waiting for litigation. We knew it was there. It was already there. And we were then also trying to figure out, like, because we're the inaugural commission, how are we going to go dormant? One of the things that we struggled with was, paying ourselves. That first, when I arrived, we had just approved a pay raise, and then we rescinded it on the same day. Like, so we were up and down and up and down. And I think there were lots of, I'm going to call it like we made it through, but it was, we were new at this as a group. And even though we had worked together for so long, there was an very intense period, and I became of mapping and finalizing those maps and making decisions, because we couldn't choose everybody's. And so I came in after that very intense period when staff were leaving, and we were trying to figure out how to go to sleep, or how to just, stay awake for litigation and continue to be responsible citizens and not take tax dollars without actually earning them, earning those dollars.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me, having watched the commission throughout its entire process pretty closely, was the sense, since this was the inaugural commission, that each stage of your work, from the launch phase through the hiring of the staff and creating all your policies and procedures, learning how to actually map and deal with the data and hold public hearings, so on. Each one of these stages was something brand new. And so the idea of defining how to go dormant when that time came, something totally brand new that hadn't been considered by any previous groups in this setting. So it stood out to me that, there were challenges and new challenges all throughout this 4 or 5 year process. So thank you very much for sharing the highlights from your term as chair. Next, we will move to former Commissioner Dustin Witches. Commissioner Witches, thank you very much for joining us as well. And I'm going to put the same questions to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the period of time when you served as chair of the commission, and what your approach to this role was? What was your kind of leadership philosophy in that role?
Sure. So first, I'd like to just say that what I noticed is that the actual, position of chair changed quite a bit, as Steve and Brittany said, from the beginning to what they were dealing with, to what mapping was like when Rebecca was chair, to when MC was chair, to then when I become chair. We're completely different animals in regards to what everyone was dealing with. For example, we were meeting every day when others were in charge and leading the commission as best as they could, to when I was chair, meeting once per month. And the actual responsibilities shifted quite a bit. As MC stated, we were looking to go dormant, and then when I took over the reins, that's basically what we were trying to do and approve dormancy status, how to reactivate, how to go dormant, so on and so forth, just so that we could put put it to bed, so to speak, if it ever came to that point in time, all the while navigating lawsuits that were happening. So my tenure was different. It was trying to keep the peace, trying to make sure everyone understood, whether it be the public or fellow commissioners, that we were in fact traveling through unknown waters with nothing but a dimmest of headlight to see where we were going and what we were doing, not knowing what to expect, and also keep peace amongst each other. Personally, it was kind of a difficult time for me. I was in the process of looking for new employment as well, which took a lot of time, and it eventually also led me to move to take the position that I have now. And I don't know if some people like that or not, but all the while keeping peace and well, making sure everyone understood that we did our best with the time that we had, navigating tough questions through the courts, making sure bills were paid on time, making sure there was still a sense of camaraderie upon every single one of us, still working together, standing with one voice. And during my time, I'd say that everyone still had that spark. We were still all working together. It wasn't until afterwards, or after my tenure, where things started to fall apart, in my opinion. But that's what I tried to do. I tried to make sure that everyone understood that we were still one team and working together for a common goal. I was always quite vocal, or tried to be quite vocal, in saying, hey, we did a good job. We should fight this to the end and appeal everything and fight as hard as we can to make sure that our end product stays and shows, like, as a test of time, that citizens can in fact do something good for the state that they live in. And that's kind of where I stood. I mean, I was only really there for 6 meetings as chair, nothing to didn't have too much that could be public facing. A lot of it was talking with Edward and saying, hey, or are there any updates that I need to be aware of, bring forward at our next meeting? And that's about it. And then trying our best to communicate that to the public whenever they would see us on our live streams.
And so by this point in time of the commission's work, the commission had really taken a lot of slings and arrows from the public, parts of the public. What was your approach to kind of dealing with the pressure that came from some parts of the public not being happy with the maps that have been produced?
Sure. Just my normal life philosophy of roll with the punches. I was always vocal in the sense that we aren't going to make everybody happy. And if we were to, quote unquote, piss everybody off equally, we did a good job. So yes, for every one person that was happy with our end product, we'd find one person who wasn't. And we'd find one person who'd say, this is drawn perfectly in this area, and have their neighbor come up to us and say, this is not what I was envisioning for our area. So just rolling with the punches, know that it was going to happen, and just stay steadfast in our belief that what we did was the best work product that we could have accomplished during our time.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. I think in a purple state like Michigan, that kind of public reaction was inevitable.
Of course.
So it's valuable to hear about how commission chairs kind of responded to those pressures and reactions. Thank you.
One thing to add, I mean, it was always interesting to see the amount of fire and passion people did have about something that most people before this could have potentially seen as something just boring and mundane.
Yeah.
Um, I have never really noticed everyone be so, besides in passing saying, well, my district is over there and the guy that represents me lives way over yonder and I don't even know what he looks like, to now being able to have a voice and saying where things were drawn and what boundaries were used. The amount of people that were actually invested in this, whether it be anyone that worked directly with us or just the public themselves, speaks volumes in the fact that we believe that we know what we were doing or learning to do, but the public itself had trust in us to do the right thing as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Next, we will turn to Commissioner Cynthia Orton. Commissioner Orton, thank you as well for being here today. And we're going to go with the same set of questions to start off here. Can you tell us a little bit about the period of time that you served as chair and what your approach and kind of leadership philosophy was in that role?
Okay, so right before me, Doug Clark actually served as chair for 6 months. So he served from March 2023 till September 2023. And so he's not with us. So I would just say he took his role as chair very seriously, and he worked tirelessly to serve the commission. So then at the end of his tenure, then I served from September 2023 to March 2024. And so as for my philosophy, I had never really thought about that philosophy, but I would say, I guess I tried to be a unifier. Many chairs have said this before me, but just trying to keep unity. I believe that teamwork is the key to accomplishing anything great on a commission or any kind of group team. We had a lot of diverse opinions on the commission, which is a good thing since the 13 of us were representing 10 million Michiganders. There had to be different opinions. And it turned out that not everyone wanted to work as a team, but I was really grateful that the majority of the commission was able to come together and find common ground and make positive solutions and accomplish the task that we were given. So during my 6 months as chair, there were some big events that happened. We had the trial in the AG case was held in November. And then we were ordered to redraw 7 state house districts and 6 state senate districts in the Detroit area. And we were given a very short time frame to accomplish that work. And right at that time, 3 commissioners turned in their resignation, Commissioner Witches, Commissioner Rothorn, and Commissioner Clark. And we got 3 new commissioners. And I was very concerned at this time. We had the short time frame that we knew we had to redraw, and we had 3 vacancies that were going to be filled by unknown people who had not had all the experience that we had up to that point. And I was especially concerned that people had signed up for the commission. These 3 commissioners were being drawn from the same original pools that we were. They had signed up years before. So I wondered, are we even going to find 3 people that are still willing and able and interested in serving on the commission? But we got just the first draw was Elaine Andrade, Donna Callahan, and Marcus Muldoon. And all 3 of them miraculously just jumped in with both feet, and they were so helpful from day one. So that was just a huge blessing to the commission. And so we were able to just keep going and do what we needed to do. We put together an intense mapping schedule to meet the court deadline. And we remapped the House districts. and we held public hearings in Detroit with our draft proposed maps. And then we chose Motown Sound FCE1 as the State House remedial plan, and presented it to the court. So I think our biggest accomplishment was that we successfully redrew. I didn't know how or if that was going to be able to happen, because it had never happened before. And we just did it. We followed our procedures, followed the constitutional amendment, and figured it out. And when we presented the remedial plan to the court, they accepted it. So that was successful. So I think that was our biggest accomplishment during that time, despite all of the ups and downs.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to editorialize too much here, but having watched this and knowing that there was some dissension on the commission at that point, 3 brand new commissioners with 0 experience, the short timeline, I was not that confident that the commission was going to be able to get that job done. And yet you all did, and clearly strong leadership played a huge role in that, and the strong bonds that the commission had developed by that point. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective. Our last former chair is Commissioner Anthony Eade. Commissioner Eade, thank you for being here as well. And same set of questions. Can you please give us an overview of the period of time of the commission's work that you served as chair, and what your kind of philosophy and approach to serving in that role was?
Well, thanks, Tom. It's always nice to hear from you. Feeling a little under the weather today, so excuse my voice. It's a little more raspy than usual. But yeah, I am the current / most recent chair, having come aboard after Cynthia. Did 6 months of that, and then my colleagues decided to re-up me for a second term, and then we went into hibernation during that term. So, I kind of think I had it a little easier than some of my colleagues, because I got to learn from each one of them. And I think being the last chair, if you will, taking a little bit of what worked from each of their leadership styles made the job a little easier for me. So I'd like to thank all of them on this call with us. A lot happened when I was chair. As Cynthia just said, we had just finished the house mapping when we turned to me, but I don't believe the court had officially approved that yet. So the court did that. They approved our house maps, the Motown Sound map, and then what we did was we took what we learned out of that process and applied it to the Senate redraw. The Senate redraw is really what was under my purview for my term. So, we had to make sure we got it done, and it was a hard time. For me, it was especially hard to navigate making sure that each of our colleagues got an adequate amount of time to put their touches on the map. We had some folks who were better at drawing than other folks. I shouldn't say better, but faster at drawing than other folks, and would be able to do perhaps put a lot of their ideas into a map, where some folks took a little bit more time, and that's okay. But making sure that everybody had time to have their input so we could have a collaborative map was important to me. Also, I wanted to make sure that the communities knew what we were doing. The Senate redraw, since Senate districts are so much larger than House districts in Michigan, they comprise a much greater area. Really, pretty much all of Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne counties were affected by the Senate redraw. So I was out going into communities, going to local city council meetings, local activism meetings, stuff like that, and just letting people know, hey, this process is happening. Please provide your public comments. Here's how you can come and talk to us. Here's when our meetings are going to be. And really going out into the communities themselves to try to get those public comments, because I wanted to keep everything as transparent as possible. And the only way to do that is getting those comments on record. during our meetings, which we had a lot of during my term. We had, and we also wanted to put a focus on Detroit. We held public hearings at Cass Tech High School, at Martin Luther King High School, and Renaissance High School. And I think hearing directly from Detroiters in those communities was pretty successful. Yeah, besides that, I think that, during this time, there were a lot of, let's say, I think there was a narrative trying to be painted so that instead of this commission drawing the maps, a special master would draw the maps. And I think that was a very purposeful narrative from certain folks that were trying to take this process out of the hands of the commission and into the hands of somebody else. Now, whether they weren't satisfied with our work the first time or they had other motives, I'm not quite sure, and we might never know that. But that is what happened. So I guess I wanted to go a little bit more on the offensive in combating that narrative instead of playing defensive, which is what we had pretty much done up to this point, and really making sure that the public knew how our work was going. And to me, that meant focusing on the work, trying to reduce the drama and just keep things afloat, keep things moving so we could really focus on the map drawing itself. I think another unique thing that happened in my term was that for the first time, we didn't reach a complete consensus when we finished drawing the Senate map. No Senate map that we drew, we had quite a few options. None of them got the required 2 Democratic votes needed in order to be passed using the first go-around structure of needing a majority plus 2 Republican votes, 2 Democratic votes, and 2 independent votes in order to get something passed. No map got those 2 Democratic votes, so we had to go to the second option, which was the ranked choice voting. Now that did work, luckily. Once we went through the ranked choice process, the Crane map, by a pretty significant margin, came up on top, and that's what the commission adopted. And a few weeks later, the court approved that map. So we went from having to do a redraw to redrawing the House and the Senate map, and the court ended up approving both, drawn by this commission. And I'm just super proud of the folks on this call and the members of the public that provided input, because we didn't know if we'd be able to get it done, but we did. And at the end of the day, even though the maps aren't perfect, I think they're a heck of a lot better than what we've seen in previous decades in Michigan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Part of my reaction, particularly to this period of the commission's work and some of the lead up to it, is in retrospect, I think it worked out quite well that the commission had to deal with some challenges, bringing on new commissioners late in the game, having to test out the ranked choice voting process. All of this, I think, will be valuable to future MIC-RC editions to have seen how some of the process in the constitutional amendment can be put to work. And at the end of the day, it all worked. The commission's maps were approved by the court. So despite all those challenges, the process was in place, it was followed, and it worked. So thank you for providing that perspective as well. We're going to transition now away from these individual discussions to a group discussion among all of the former chairs who are with us tonight, and focus on lessons learned throughout this long and complicated process that the commission went through over the last 4 or 5 years. And so, as I noted at the beginning of this panel discussion, one other former chair recently came out with recommendations against having ordinary, randomly chosen citizens do redistricting, saying, as I understand it, that this person thinks ordinary citizens are not capable of doing this work and that only experts should do it. So the question I want to put to all of you, and please, just talk amongst yourselves, is what are your thoughts about that? Do you think that independent citizen commissions like the MIC-RC are up to the task and capable of drawing good maps or not?
If I may begin, I would love to say, yeah, I think we give up our power as citizens at our own peril. I think if we either learn to do this, citizens are ultimately the people who elect the professionals who had been legislating and making maps prior to a citizen led commission doing it. And I think there was a wonderful group of citizens that said enough. And so those citizens led an effort, took the power back. And we just happened to be the ones that filled that role. We volunteered. And I'm grateful that we were paid, frankly, too, because I think it helps remove barriers. I think it's not fair for people who can volunteer, so to speak, to only be allowed the privilege of represent, or we're not representing, but we are doing something significant. And it just feels like it's so important that we get better at it, that we get better at citizen-led functions of governing. Like we do it ourselves. And I don't think we can like appoint professionals and have something that feels like kind, and heart-centered. I'll say like people-centered, like something that feels, I'll just say kind. And that's what I want to say.
MC, I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. I don't think that's also like a surprise. I think to suggest that citizens can't be the core function of regaining voice and autonomy and democracy suggests a feebleness that is just so inaccurate. And we've seen in society in America, and there are even tensions now, when that power is taken away from groups and we assume the worst. We assume that people aren't capable, aren't smart enough of creating change, of being creative, all the things that it took for us to do this, of getting along. These are things that we teach young people are completely possible, and we look for in our husbands, our wives, our children. Like, these are core values. So when to suggest that citizens are somehow inept is not only sad, but it's harmful, it's disruptive, it's a violent statement to suggest that. And it speaks against all the work that we were able to do and all the magic, all the faith that we saw, which was real. We did not make this up, family. We saw this happening with citizens connecting with us and getting it, and news sources becoming our worst enemy and skeptical in the beginning, but like falling in love with some of us and us as a whole, and wondering and wanting us to continue to share. So it couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. And I mean, besides getting to be with you all, I think it's ridiculous that we even have to have a last word.
I just wanted to echo something here as well. Based on what this individual stated, to me, it came across of, if you're not as smart as me, then you can't do this job. What I can say is, having even when I wasn't there, making it, or the redrawing of the actual maps themselves and having them be approved by the court is kind of a huge thing to have happened, because the threat of having someone do it for us was very real, and I'm assuming over everybody's heads. And we proved the fact, or the commission proved, that they indeed can do it and learn how to do it successfully in a short amount of time. And everyone's skills that they bring to the table, strengthens the commission as a whole for future commissions, I would say. I just lost that train of thought. See if it'll come back in a minute. I'll be quiet here for a second.
If I can not push back, but dig in a little bit more detail. As I understand the critique from this other commissioner, former chair, part of her idea is that redistricting is really complicated and complex, and you have to learn an awful lot to do it. And as I understand her argument, she just doesn't think that randomly picking citizens can work with that kind of level of complex undertaking. what do you think about the technical aspect of the work that you all have been through now, and how complex it actually was? 13 randomly chosen people came together and did it. Looking back, I guess I kind of have to say, you did it successfully because your maps were approved by the courts. But what's your reaction to this idea that the work is too demanding, too complex, too esoteric, or something like that?
I would just say that we're proof positive that it's not. Like, sure, it has its difficulties, and there is a lot to learn, but it can be done, and it can be learned quickly, especially with guidance of people who do know what they're doing. I guess my point was making sure that people have a credential when they're drawing the actual maps is kind of wrong, because if you have experts, who's paying the expert? You're gonna get that particular bias, I suppose, from whoever's signing the paychecks. Whereas we were actually just ordinary folks that did it, and we all came together and actually completed it successfully the second time, with only 7 districts having to be redrawn. That's not a whole lot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in here, and I have a few thoughts. My first thought is I don't understand the logic that says citizens can't do it, considering we did do it successfully. And there is no perfect map here, right? The way I look at it is it depends, whether you think this commission is a success or a failure depends on what you compare us to. Or you have to take our maps and compare it to previous maps, or compare it to compare it to the structure of other states. And I think it's inarguable that the maps that this commission has come up with are much more responsive to the electorate than previous maps that this state has seen in previous decades. And I think that's the whole reason why Michigan voters amended our Constitution in 2018 to create this commission in the first place. As far as structure goes, there are pros and cons, right? There's a lot of ways to choose a redistricting commission. I think that this way, having the random selection, not only does it introduce a diversity of skill sets, because not everybody needs to be an expert in actual map drawing. There's a lot more that goes into this job than drawing maps, right? I think I was pretty darn good at actually drawing maps, but I was really bad at other things, right? And my colleagues on this call, they were really good at other things that I was terrible at, and when we talk about things like interacting with the public, setting up public hearings, making sure our technology was up and running, doing things like advertising, doing things like, taking care of our budget. There's a whole plethora of responsibilities that this job includes, other than the technicalities of drawing the maps. In fact, I would argue that drawing the maps is perhaps the technicalities is a little less important, because you can always hire out for that. And we had folks that we hired, other commissions and the legislature who drew the maps in the past, they do the same thing. They hire those technical skills out using vendors, using RFPs, just like how we did. So I think what you see when you kind of put your thumb on the scales and look for certain attributes of commissioners, you see things like more partisanship come into play. You see that in many states around the country. You see more roadblocks, and you see it overall as a detriment to actually getting the job done. So again, there are pros and cons, but I think you really got to look at it holistically. And I think if you do that, you'll see that this method that we've created in Michigan is one of the best.
Any other thoughts about the ability of randomly chosen citizens to do this work?
Well, I think, as has already been said, we showed that it can work. It does work. And I would just echo what my fellow commissioners have said, that the diversity of background and skills is good. And it does represent well the citizens of Michigan. And like Commissioner Eid said, we did have experts that we hired to do the actual technical. We didn't have to create software to draw maps, for goodness sakes. We just had to say where the boundaries needed to be. And that came from what we heard the public saying. So I think citizens can do it. And it's great to see government by the people, for the people.
Commissioner Lett, we lost you there for just a minute. We're just gathering any ideas about the critique that randomly chosen citizens are just not up to doing something like this. Any thoughts on your end?
Sure. We probably know better and know worse than the quote experts, which previously, whether Democrat or Republican, have been elected officials who were obviously guarding their own nest. So I think that we, as a group of 13 commissioners, in fact, moved away from that, though I'm sure that there are a number of politicians who don't agree with that, since I've heard that from politicians. But we certainly were able to be instructed by professionals as to how the process works and how we as a commission needed to apply the process to get to a point where the gerrymander was taken out of it. Now, I will say that everybody, including us, gerrymanders the districts. We gerrymander them to be as fair as possible. Politicians gerrymander them to protect their CYA. So it's a matter of perspective as to what you're doing. Well, I guess I would rather have 13 citizens' perspective on what they're doing versus elected officials who want to keep getting elected. That's their job, to keep getting elected. I would also say that one of the things that I found, and I've stated it before, is we had, especially our mapping experts, EDS, that we did not use to their full capability. We certainly could have discussed with them, and they with us, different methodologies to come up with the fairest maps. And that was something that we, I'll say, we didn't know was happening until way late in the process, that certain information was being withheld from us. And that clearly was not a good scene. We managed to overcome it, but it should never have started in the first place. In the end, when after the court case, after the litigation, then clearly one commissioner felt that she would be able to come in and say, here's the perfect solution, you all vote for this. Well, it wasn't, whether it was a perfect solution or not, what it wasn't a joint solution or a joint commission solution, and therefore it wasn't the best. And it did not survive the voting. So the commission came back together, and I will give great credence to the three new commissioners. They quickly saw what was going on, not only in the meetings but behind the scenes, what some of the machinations by the other commissioner was, and they saw through that, and they felt and they contributed to the commission as a whole maybe we didn't have as much bonding as we had with the others, but they came in and contributed very nicely. I can't say enough for them. I also can't say enough for the people who are sitting here, except for Rawthorne. He quit, but left us in a lurch. And of course, Dustin, he flees. He moves out of state.
Sorry.
Hey, Clark up and dies on us. I can't believe it.
Yeah, the worst of all, unfortunately.
But we did a good job. We did a good job.
Yeah.
In my mind, there's no question about it.
Thank you all for sharing these thoughts. I'm going to put one more question if anyone has quick thoughts about it, and then just see if anyone has any last thoughts that they want to raise that we haven't touched on. And so my last question is about the process of identifying the role of the chair, selecting a new chair, and the term of the chair. How do you think that all went for this commission? Anything you would recommend maybe the next commission think about doing differently?
I thought it worked pretty well. We decided early on that it would be a rotating chair. Obviously, we had no idea of the capabilities or desires of the individual commissioners. I'll state it right up front. I stated that when I was elected as the first chair, I wanted it. I wanted to be the first chair, and fortunately, I convinced everybody else that I would do a adequate job. I think rotating is a good deal. Some commissioners had both arms twisted at times in order to accept the chair position. Don't want to mention any names, but her initials are Cynthia Orton, and she turned out to be a great chair, absolutely great chair. Brittany was a great chair. MC was a little touchy feely.
Well, so let me just break in here. So I really think that when I think back on the chairs, and, like Dustin said, we each had different things going on during our tenure. I think every chair was just perfect for their time. There's something about their personality. It just worked really well with what was needed at that time. And I think we were really fortunate.
Well, I can't agree with that 100%, but 90%, yeah.
I wish I had one more vote during one particular time, if I remember correctly. But
one of the things I want to offer too is that the support from the other commissioners, I think, contributed to the chair. I think there were right, and the people who started early on, like I think Anthony said it really well, right? When you're towards the end, you benefit a great deal because there is a pattern, right? So the courage to sort of like be the first, and I think we may have done this because we were unwilling to sort of like have one person lead us the whole time. I think we wanted, but in the the most generous way of looking at it, I think, is I think we wanted to share power with each other, and I think that this speaks also to the idea of we didn't want to specialize, right? I think we wanted to have a diversity, right, and bring the diversity of our commission and our commissioners into that leadership role. There was no in many ways, there was a burden without a privilege, right? You had a sort of a hat, but no extra pay, no extra. You had more responsibilities and more time to commit, but there was nothing else, right? That was sort of extra. So it was hard. And again, I think the fellow commissioners, right, did support. So it did turn out in many ways the way I think Cynthia described it, where it's like it was perfect. I think there were many of us rose to that occasion, and I think each of us spoke to that pretty well. But it's sharing power that I want to offer is one of the things I think it works really well, and it brings that diversity of the commissioner each commissioner into the leadership role.
I think by the end, it was, we figured out it wasn't sharing the power, it was sharing the pain.
Yeah.
I was gonna add like power is kind of like the wrong term to use, because I mean we were all the chair really was doing was calling the meeting to order and calling on people to talk in particular order, and then either butt in after every single person talked or let the conversation flow naturally. But I mean, it wasn't like no one chair of the entire commission in my mind was like in charge. Everyone had the same voice, I guess, at the table the entire time. So
I want to combine what Dustin and MC are saying, because I really think if for future commissions, and even now we get the privilege of kind of really being reflective as what all this was. But listening to my peers and just kind of thinking about it right now, this was an opportunity, as we know, to reimagine what politicians typically did. And one of the things that politicians do is they kind of usurp and they covet power. So in one instance, it's about redefining what power can look like in a healthier environment, when it's nurtured and when people actually like each other. And so when I think about what the role of chair, vice chair, it is also facilitation. It's power in this arena, and as it should be, is what Dustin just described. But this is a job that is not necessarily about mapping, which I could hear people just like, oh my God, did she say that? Yes, I did. It's about peopling. It's about peopling. And that's what politicians got wrong. They didn't know how to people. They didn't know how to relate to others. And so your chair and vice chair, it doesn't matter if they're a bit of a hard nose or they're a bit of a rule follower, cough, cough, Steve Lett, but he likes people. He's going to not allow certain things to happen. You need an Anthony, a Cynthia, a Dustin, an MC, a Brittany, and a Steve. And so to look at us, and though we might look different from coming, commissions, find the part of you, find the part of a group that kind of resembles these wacky folks. And I think if you can find community in each person, you're going to do really well.
Okay, we've gone a little bit over here, but I just want to open it up and see if anybody has any topic or issue or comment that they would like to touch on that we haven't already.
But one of the things that we heard repeatedly is, how were you chosen, and how come nobody is here from Grand Rapids, and how come nobody is here from the Upper Peninsula, and how come you only have 2 from Detroit? How come this? How come that? I'm hoping that the powers to be in the next selection will tweak their logarithms and figure out how to address some of those issues. People would say, how did you get chosen? Well, it's a random draw. Well, it's almost a random draw, and so that would be a good thing, to tweak that selection process.
My biggest thing, and I've said this ever since I left, is with after the next census tract comes to fruition in 5 years, and the next commission is to be seated. If you have any inkling or any thought in your head that this is something that you would like to do, I would recommend that you actually do it and apply to be part of it, because it is life changing. And it is probably one of the most honorable things I think I've done. And I look back on my time with the commission, and I'm extraordinarily proud of everybody, including myself and everyone here and the public, and watching everyone come together and do something for the greater good of their state. If that's something that rings true, that you would hold dear to yourself, I would highly recommend that you give it a shot. You'll lose sleep, but it's a good adventure to go down. Nice path.
Yeah, I'd just say if you are going to apply, make sure you have some thick skin as well. The only negative part of this job that I think has happened over the past few years, especially during the Senate redraw, was the amount of just personal attacks that were happening, via social media, sometimes via public comment. And I think they were really disingenuous. And I think they were coming from folks with an agenda to derail the work of this commission. But I think as long as you have that thick skin and can kind of put those issues behind you, it is a very rewarding job.
I'd apply again, but I don't live in the state anymore.
Okay, well, this unfortunately it's time to wrap up, but this has been a very valuable discussion. I am grateful to each of the commissioners for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And even more so, along with millions of other Michiganders, I'm grateful to all of you chairs, the commissioners, and the commission's dedicated staff, including Executive Director Edward Woods III, for taking on the enormous task of redistricting Michigan's legislative and congressional districts, for working diligently through very significant challenges, and for upholding your responsibilities in a largely bipartisan way, despite today's hyper-partisan political environment. In fact, I'd like to take just a moment to quote former Commissioner Doug Clark, who, as we heard, sadly passed away in January of 2024. On one of the earlier panel discussions of this commission, Commissioner Clark made the point that what he intended to bring to the commission was a fair and impartial approach to his work, along with his personal qualities that included objectivity, the ability to work constructively with others, and an honest and sincere effort to meet the commission's charge. Having watched this commission closely throughout its entire existence, it's clear to me that Doug did that exactly. And in my opinion, I think his service stands as proof, along with each of your service and the high quality maps that this commission created, that in fact randomly selected citizens are indeed capable of serving successfully as redistricting commissioners. Finally, I should note that all of the commission's work can be accessed by the public at any time, unlike previous rounds of redistricting that were done behind closed doors. All the commission's work is available on the commission's website and YouTube channel, as well as at the State of Michigan Archive and at the University of Michigan's Bentley Historical Library. And the URLs for all of those you can see on your screen now. So with that, thank you for joining us. Thank you to all you former chairs for taking the time to share your lessons learned with us, and good night.
Thank you. Bye.